Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figure It Out Productions. The following video is part of our Quick Shoot series.
I received a package, and I'm going to go ahead and open this up and then talk all about it. So let's just go right there. Alright, we have this. This came from the UK, from a store called retrotowers.co.uk. It's an online website based in the UK, a video game store. Awesome store. I actually do a lot of business there. There's their card. It's a cool store. But anyway, so what I got here from them was 2 Sega Genesis cartridges, but these are not ordinary Sega Genesis cartridges, no. These are, neither of them are games. So you're thinking, well, what are they? So the first thing here, this, is essentially a memory card. You guys might have seen a video recently where I think it was my 7th generation recap video, where I talked about memory cards and how we're not getting those anymore, and that the Sega CD was actually the first console to ever use them. I was wrong. It was actually the Neo Geo AES. Thank you to the people who corrected me on that. But my point still stands. The Sega CD did use memory cards, and that's what this is. Now, the thing is, Sega released their own version of that back in the early 90s. It's a memory card. You know, I mean, if you have a Sega CD, the thing has flash memory. You can save games to it, but it's really limited. It's like 200 blocks or something. So Sega released this, and it has 2,000 blocks. But the thing is, this thing's pretty expensive now. This thing goes anywhere between like $30 and $80, depending on condition. And you kind of need one if you're going to get into the Sega CD. Fortunately, this is where Retro Towers comes in. This one has over 8,000 blocks, so, you know, I think this thing costs like 30 pounds, which is like $55, something like that. And it's basically like having 4 of these. So if you're into the Sega CD, or you're going to get into the Sega CD, I'm looking at you, Sega CD Universe, Vampire Mike, you need extra space to save your games. And this should be awesome for that. I'm going to go obviously test it out, make sure there's nothing like weird about it that I don't know, but essentially it's a memory card. You guys know what the function of a memory card is. It's just the biggest memory card for the Sega CD. So that's awesome to have. Now on to this other cartridge. This is the Power Base Converter. What is it exactly? This is a cartridge that will allow you to play Sega Master System games. The Sega Master System was Sega's first console in North America, and I believe in Europe, their 3rd console worldwide. And it was basically to compete with Nintendo's NES. It's very similar in that regard. Just didn't do very well in North America, although I think it did do very well in Europe, and I know it did ridiculously well in South America. Its games, its entire game library is actually, awkward to say this, but it's essentially backwards compatible with the Sega Genesis. All the hardware necessary to play Sega Master System games exists in the Sega Genesis, but Sega did not make it natively compatible. I think the reason for this was probably to reduce production costs, but they gave you the option of playing it. They released this, the original Power Base Converter, which is just a simple add-on. You just plug right into the top of the Genesis, and you're good to go to play Sega Master System games. But the problem with this one is incredibly obvious, the shape. It's only compatible with the original big blocky version of the Sega Genesis. It's not compatible with, you know, the Genesis 2, the slim model, the Genesis 3, the Sega CDX, the Pioneer, Laser Active, you know, the Nomad, everything. All of the various incarnations of the Genesis, this one does not work on. So the idea here is that this one will alleviate that and make a more universal cartridge for Sega Master System games. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and test both of these cartridges out and, you know, see how they work, and let you know what kind of perhaps oddities arise.
Okay, so I've popped on the Sega CD here, and in case you've never heard the Sega CD intro, it's really, really awesome. Plays music and stuff. It's cool. So with the memory card, just like with any Genesis game, you put it in before you turn the console on. Do not take it out while the console's on, etc. So once you're in, you go to your options menu, and it'll say, please format, because it recognizes it, but it needs you to do that. So you go ahead and press, you know, any button like it says, and it'll take you to these options. So you just go ahead, you click format, and it's, you know, going to say yes. You go ahead, boom. That's real time. It really takes no time at all to do that. So once that's done and it's formatted, you can go ahead and check on it if you want. and you'll see you have 8,189 blocks, and it works perfectly.
Okay, so before I go into my final thoughts on both of these products, I first want to address the point that I'm sure a few people will bring up. Yes, I know this is a very niche couple of products. I know that emulators exist, and I could just play this all on my computer and have no such problems, etc., etc. It's just not what I want to do, and I know I'm not alone. There's plenty of people that like just the authentic experience of playing it the way it was meant to be played, or as close to that as possible with the budget you may have access to. So with that in mind, you know, for old school people who really want to do it that way, that's what these products are made for. So if you're thinking that I should just, you know, just get an emulator, fuck this stuff, it's just not the way, it's not the point. So I hope you understand that if you're one of those people. But anyway, so on to the memory cards, or the memory card, I should say. Aside from formatting it, which you saw there briefly, there's nothing wrong with it. It's exactly what you would expect it to do, or expect it to be. It's a memory card. You know, it's just a bigger one, and it does its job perfectly fine. So once you format it, you're all good to go. I highly recommend it. It's way better than the Sega CD's internal flash memory, and it's more affordable than the original version and 4 times the size. So yeah, that's really all I have to say on it. Highly recommend it if you're in the market to save Sega CD games. That's it. It's a really good memory card. That's about all I have to say on it. The other one there's a little bit more to say. I will open up by saying that I think that this is much better than the original version. But that being said, there are a couple of things that I must say about the original version that are actually in its favor. Only like 1.5 things, really. The first is the hue card issue. For those who are unaware, Sega Master System Games came on cartridges. You know, plain Jane cartridges. But there were some, not many, but some games that came on hue cards. Like the TurboGrafx 16. There's like 10 of them, as far as I know. There's really not many, and most of them suck. So you can't play these on the this version of the power base converter because obviously it doesn't have a slot for it. Really not that big of a loss, but it is to be noted, just because I don't want you for some reason thinking it can do that. The other issue, which is only like half an issue really, is the pause button problem. For those who don't know, the Sega Master System has no pause button on its controller. Even with a Genesis controller, or even when using this on a Genesis, you can't press pause with the controller to stop the game. You have to use a pause button on this thing. Now, in this thing's case, it's not that big of a deal because this is very grounded. It's very molded for the, obviously, for the Genesis Model 1, so you can push it with some sense of, you know, ferocity and intensity, and nothing will happen. It'll pause just like it's supposed to. This one does have a pause button, but frankly, because it's right on the cartridge, you have to be a lot more gentle with it. If you push it too hard, you really risk freezing your game, and that's bad. So just be aware of that. But if you keep the cartridges clean, the system clean, and you don't just punch it, you should be fine. But it is, again, worth noting. Other than those two things, this thing totally takes the cake. It's really the only argument you need is its compatibility. It works on the Genesis Model 1, like this does, but it also works on the Genesis Model 2, which opens the floodgates to tons of people who potentially want to play Sega Master System games on the Genesis. Which is new in North America, by the way. I know in Europe there was a Power Base Converter 2 for the Mega Drive 2, but we didn't have that over here, so it's new to us. And I assume, by the way, this works on a Mega Drive. I don't have one to test, but I would assume it works. Especially because it came from the UK, so it must. It does not work on the Genesis Model 3, but nothing does. That's really not surprising. It works on the Sega CDX. It probably works on like the JVC-XI, Pioneer Laser Active, those things. Didn't test it on those. But I would assume it does, especially the JVC-XI. Doesn't work on the Nomad, which is a little disappointing, but it is what it is. The only real kicker here is that it doesn't work with the 32X. Now that's not surprising. I assumed that would be the case, but it's annoying. Because if you look here, you'll see, what my setup is. I have the Genesis 32X Sega CD all hooked up at once. and with one power cord through an RGB SCART lead to HDMI, and it's great. It looks amazing. So when I pick up new Master System games, it would have been really nice to just pop this in and then pop the game on top and test it out. But unfortunately, it just won't work because of the 32X. So what that means is it's actually easier for me to bring out a Genesis Model 2, hook that up, and then test it on there. So whatever, it is what it is. But aside from that, I really have no complaints. So I would highly recommend it. I recommend you go to retrotowers.co.uk. Pick it up, pick up the card if you're in the market for either of those things. And actually, I can help you out with that a little bit. My name, Adam K, is a coupon code over at that website. You'll get 5% off your order no matter what it is. You're welcome. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all later.